and the deepest aspects of all pranayama, we create an energy flow, the magnetism of which begins to attract to us the higher realities of wisdom and compassion, intuitive insights. Good morning, everyone. That Whispers is from Yogananda's collection of prayer demands for children, so I figured that was appropriate. You know, the other day, Padma and I were having a discussion. There were some differences had come up, you know, and finally I said to her, Padma, you need to embrace your mistakes. And you know what she did? She gave me a hug. The innocence of a child, huh? I guess one could say we live in an age that is anything but innocent. You know, the great gift of reason and leading to science, and science leading, of course, or including evidence and exploration and analysis. And we've been given many great gifts on our planet and so on by the virtue of our concentration on the material world and how it works. But we've lost a great deal too, haven't we? This is not just an age of reason, but it's also the age of the individual, which is a very good thing. Sri Yukteswar, Yogananda's guru, in his famous book, The Holy Science, says that in this age in which we now live, people's self-respect will grow, will become into itself. You know, I think back to at least my image of like the Middle Ages and so forth, centuries from which we've come, and there was very little self-respect. It was the age of serfs, you know. Whatever you were born into, you were stuck into. Opportunities for education and travel and exploration, etc., for the most part, just didn't exist. Now, of course, you know, I'm just speaking very generally. There are always exceptional individuals under all circumstances and so forth. But nonetheless, what we've been given and what we've sought, actually, which is to say an understanding of the world in which we live, has brought us many good things, but we have lost also a great deal. You know, there was you've probably all heard of the opioid crisis. It's not anything that I have to say I have any personal connection or what have you with, but it's apparently quite a few people have died and suffered from that. And there were three brothers, Arthur, Raymond, and Mortimer Sackler, who back when there were three Jewish guys, grew up in New York, in the Bronx, or Brooklyn, I guess it was, and they became doctors. And Arthur was the elder brother and sort of guided his two younger brothers. But basically, they felt in different ways initially that, well, let me put it this way. The use of, you know, Coca-Cola got its name from the fact that it had cocaine in it at one point. And there were people experimenting with heroin back 100 plus years ago. Well, we can see where that all would have gone. But what happened is there became a great stigma attached to the use of narcotics for the relief of pain. They were only being used for end-of-life situations and increasingly with cancer. And these three brothers had it for their mission to bring these drugs to the world for the relief of pain in a much broader sense. In other words, chronic pain. Back in that time, in the early part of the 20th century, a lot of people worked in things like mines and in factories and what would probably be looked at today as hard physical labor. The amount of physical pain that resulted from the lifestyle, the poor nutrition, the long working hours, and so forth that came out of the Industrial Revolution was itself an epidemic, a plague. And so these fellows set out to change the consciousness of the medical profession in its reluctance to use these narcotics for the relief of suffering. Sounds good, doesn't it? But you know, what took over in the consciousness of these three brothers almost immediately was greed. The Sackler family made billions of dollars before it caught up with them, because they advertised, they created their like OxyContin specifically, but also they created Valium before that, was marketed in such a way and was coded in such a way that it was the first time of slow release tablets. You know, to otherwise have a narcotic prior to that meant you were on the street and shooting up or snorting or whatever. This made it white middle class available for pain. But the sales technique that this would be slow release and you would never get addicted because you'd never have a spike and then a trough and so forth with withdrawal symptoms was in fact untrue. Even the clinical trials showed them that what they had hoped to accomplish wasn't true, but greed took over. And they marketed the hell out of it. And as I say, made billions and billions of dollars, one of the wealthiest families on the planet, until it finally caught up with them. We were talking yesterday with some of our students in our counseling class, spiritual counseling class, and so on, about how, and I teach the meditation teacher training that comes up every couple of years here. And one thing I observe in meditating and working with students who are meditating is that we have some kind of an inner experience or upliftment. And right away, the ego claims the credit. You know, the ego is right there on the forefront of everything. And of course, the ego can also blame ourselves and blame others. We can take blame or give credit. But that tendency in this age, with uppermost of self-interest and the age of the individuality, to claim for ourselves or to blame for ourselves, really eclipses from us to see the truth that shall make us free, as I like to say. And then I was thinking also that well, one of the things that has inspired me greatly over the decades is Sri Yukteswar's expose, his revelation of the history of humanity as having descended, as all the great civilizations, in fact, have always claimed, from a past golden age. And in the Raja book, you know, we just started the Raja course, the very first chapter talks about the history of yoga as descending from a period of greater knowledge. But yet, with our sort of egocentric consciousness in our culture, we look back in history and we see these dumb old cavemen grunting and thumping one another, and we look at ourselves and think we're the epitome of human civilization. Well, I don't know about you, but I look around and it's not what I see. And so this eclipses our ability to see what's really going on and who we really are. And so we have images, you know, maybe you look back, archaeologists look back and they see, you know, stone things or what have you, and people worshiping the sun, and we have all these impressions of people of being superstitious. I'm not saying there isn't plenty of superstition, and especially in the past, of course, but maybe something else was really going on. You know, Sri Yukteswar talks about how in about 2,000 plus years, humanity will enter an age that we once had long ago, where we will have great mental power. Our perception of subtler realities will be greatly enhanced. And I don't doubt for 1 minute that the growing use and practice of meditation is one of the things that will gradually allow the civilization and the culture to become more inwardly and psychically sensitive. Now, we're speaking, of course, in generalities. There are many people among us who are greatly sensitive and so forth, perceive lots of things that the ordinary person does not. But when I think of, and he called that power in the future and from the past, the power to understand and perceive divine magnetism. You know, ours being an age of energy, we're very energy conscious, whether it be out in the world with energy and fossil fuels and all that sort of thing, or it be our own energy. We speak of energy illnesses, chronic illness and so forth, chronic fatigue, more of those subtler things, because it was always there, how could it not be? But we are more sensitive. But our sensitivity goes around energy. Well, behind energy, or the consequence of energy and the source of energy both, is magnetism, something that we are only dimly aware of. Sri Yukteswar said in his description of that level of consciousness that it's so beyond the grasp of the human mind he wouldn't even talk about it when he wrote his book in 1894, the bum. So what is he talking? What is divine magnetism? Because for people like you and I, especially as meditators and people trying to unite ourselves to Dharma and a higher truth and reality, etc., we should be sensitive. We should try to be awakened to that magnetism. Well, in the crude animal sense, as he put it, we're familiar with electricity. When it goes through a wire, especially at high voltage, it creates, as we know, a field of electromagnetic energy around that energy. People with a great deal of energy are the people who are of a genius level. People who, we think of our own friend and our founder, Swami Kriyananda, who, as I like to say, was, the original Energizer Bunny. And so when you think of images of people, conducting rituals and yagyas and ceremonies, much of that is sort of the residue, the almost superstitious, mechanical residue of a consciousness that once understood how things actually worked. And I wanted to read to you the 3 verses from the Bhagavad Gita. Prajapati, God in the aspect of creator, brought mankind into manifestation, and in so doing gave mankind the potential for self-offering into a higher than human awareness through yagya, self-offering. Along with this gift, he enjoined mankind, whatever you desire, seek it by offering energy back to the source of all energy. Let this yagya, this sacrifice, be your milk cow of fulfillment. With this offering, commune with the shining angels, the devas, that they may commune with you. Through such mutual communion, you will arrive at the highest good. By communion with the devas, you will receive from them the fulfillments you desire. He who enjoys the gifts of the gods without returning due offering to them is verily a thief. In the act of Kriya, yoga, when we move the energy through the spine, and in the deepest aspects of all pranayama, we create an energy flow, the magnetism of which begins to attract to us the higher realities of wisdom and compassion, intuitive insights. That is the nature of our being. Our very body, we speak in yoga of prana, the energy. Yogananda coming to America, and with these not very bright Americans, he had to come up with some new terminology. Instead of using the word prana, he called it lifetrons. And instead of the causal sphere of thought and intelligence, he called it thoughttrons. And but we look at this marvelous thing called the body, what to mention everything else in nature, but we're very aware of our body, or at least somewhat aware of our body, and we have no idea what's going on in it. The marvelous intelligence of this own form that we possess is not even ours. The knowledge of who we are and the energy and the life that we have comes from a much higher source. And when we meditate and when we pray, when we think of spirit, think of God, think of guru, etc., we are offering our intelligence, our energy back from which it comes. And those shining devas, in fact, are the intelligent divine energy sources known as the chakras. And when we move that energy through the shining devas within ourselves, then we draw the power to attract to ourselves whatever we need. Jesus put it far more simply. He said, "Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all these things that are needful to your life will be added unto you." Give back to the source all that which you have, and that will complete the great cycle of life that he's talking about here in the Bhagavad Gita. This is a principle that when we look back and we see people, quote, worshiping, as Christians like to use the term, it strikes many of us, it certainly has been for myself, as some residue of some lack of knowledge. But when you take it within yourself and you realize that we are so much more than what we appear, we don't even have control of what's going on within this physical form, what to mention what's going on in our life. And we have the opportunity to understand that it's the magnetism. Thoughts, Yogananda wrote so famously now, are universally, not individually rooted. And that divine magnetism, first off, magnetism is already divine. He wrote it in English actually. Divine magnetism, all magnetism is of a higher order, except to the extent that we pull it down into an animal type magnetism. But the term reminds us is that it's all spirit, that it's all invisible, that it's all beyond form, has its source in form. So the true purpose of worship, the true purpose of devotion, the true purpose of self-offering, of yajna, whether done in the sense of a ceremony or done in the more deeper sense of thought and prayer, and of course pranayama, including the Kriya Yoga, which is our the essence of what Yogananda brought in terms of meditation. That is the offering into the devas, the offering into the divine. And it's that creates the magnetism to draw unto ourselves all those things that are added unto us. This is an insight for which most people, I admit, are not really prepared. It's a little bit subtle. That's why Sri Yukteswar wouldn't even talk about what divine magnetism was. But we don't have to be stopped by that. We can tune into it and realize that life is so much more than the karma that we've received. Even the changing of karma is the result of the changing of our own magnetism, understanding that the power that we have, the skills that we have, it says elsewhere in the Gita that all those who are great and successful, etc., are but manifestations of this great magnetism of spirit. In the highest age, people will have that direct perception of spirit, which is the thoughttrons, if you will. But in the age to come, as we work towards that increased awareness, it's the awareness of this flow of magnetism. And that magnetism comes from the concentration of energy. We live in an age when concentration is at its perhaps its lowest ebb. When you think of all the mental issues that we see all around us, when we see, issues with, computers and phones and all those kinds of things, memory loss, the plague of those issues, all of that is the consequence of the lack of focus. And the focus is what generates the energy generates the magnetism, and the magnetism is what draws to us in relation to the quality of energy that we put out, what we're seeking. That's the secret to success, even material success. As I read about with these three brothers, they were high energy. They started hundreds of companies. I mean, it was really an amazing thing, but it was a curse. And yet it started out as something else. And so when we don't have that connection, don't have the magnetism to attract what is true to us, what is right for us, then we are the blind leading the blind ourselves. So divine magnetism, think about it.